Hi everyone, this is Christy with Paper Hoarder Disorder. I just wanted to go over and do a video of how I decorate, different techniques on how to decorate chipboard pieces. And these are cut out of medium weight chipboard from the Tim Holtz Hardware Findings Biggs die. And so I've got 6 different techniques here, and I wanted to show you roughly how I go over them because I have a lot of people that ask how to decorate chipboard. And so on this very first one, I used surprise, surprise, nail polish. So if you have a metallic gold or silver, copper, any kind of metallics work just fine. I've never done it with glitter, but I'm sure you probably could. But, you know, real lacquers and the 99-cent bottles typically are not going to be a true lacquer. They're going to be a polish. So you'll be looking at a real lacquer, which will give you a shinier coat, a thicker coat, and it's going to be far more opaque with a true lacquer. And those are usually bottles that are typically $5 and above. So this one right here is Sally Hansen from the Salon Manicure line. I don't know exactly what color it is, but it is a gold. And you can use this on your chipboard. If you already have it, it's kind of handy. It makes your nail polish do double duty. On here, on this one, I did a dry rub on here. And so this is the pocket watch from, I believe it's Tim Holtz Movers and Shapers. And again, this is just black chipboard. And I did a dry rub on this one. And you can see on here, maybe, there you go, that you see a lot of that black showing through, almost 50% black showing through. Whereas on this one, I put 3 coats of the polish on there. And also, I wanted to show you this one. Here it is at 1 coat, and you can still see the gold isn't quite opaque. You can still see a little bit of the black through there. The gold just isn't as bright. So this is 1 coat, and this is 3 coats, and this is a simple dry brush. Now, when you do use the nail polish, you're going to need to use acetone to get it off of your brush or off of your finger, whatever you're using, unless you're just painting it straight on like this. But for a dry rub, you're going to need to use that to get that off. The acrylic paint works exactly the same way. So right here, I'm using the Deco Art Dazzling Metallics, and this is Medieval Gold. So on this one, here we have another dry brush. And you can see a lot of that black is kind of, well, you might not be able to see it very well. A lot of that black is shining through, maybe just under 50%. And here is a piece dry brushed, and you can see a lot of that black, and it kind of looks pitted when you just hit the tops of it. And then here it is painted on with, I believe this is 2 coats. So there's a big difference between how much you put on there. So I will go ahead and I will just use the acrylic because the acrylic and the polish are applied exactly the same way. So you want to make sure that you shake up your acrylic paint very well. Now I just do it with my fingers because it's easy. So I will show you the dry brush. And so I've just got a piece of chipboard, and this is just flat black. And so what I'll do is I'll usually take some of this, I'll put a little bit on my hand, and I'll just dab it off to where I just have just a tiny little bit on my finger. And then I'm just going to lightly touch the top. And I'm not looking to rub it in, I'm just looking to hit the surface. Now you can do this with an actual brush, the dry brush technique, of course, but I do find it's easier to wash my finger in my hand than to sit over the sink and rinse out a brush for a couple minutes, making sure that every little bit gets out so I don't ruin my brushes. This can clean up real easy with just a baby wipe, a single baby wipe, and you're done and on to your next project. So I'm going to hit the sides of it too to give it some dimension here. And so there is a dry brushed keyhole. And then if you decide, and you can see on here, you can see this pitting. Maybe it'll show up. Come on, camera. Focus. sometimes, sorry about that, almost got it, maybe you can focus in on the nail. Boy, it won't, there we go, finally, huh? There you go. So you can see a lot of that pitting underneath. It makes it look like real metal because it has that variation in it, and it has those highs and lows, and we didn't fill them all in. So it's got a lot of texture to it, and it looks really neat to me. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and get this full solid opaque finish, then I would just use a brush and just paint it on, let it dry, and paint it again. So that takes care of how to use both nail polish lacquer and an acrylic paint. So the second thing, actually those are the first two. So the third thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do the heat embossing on here. So again, the same chipboard keyhole. And I chose a gold, and this is from the, wow, let me see if I can zoom in on this. You can see how neat the texture is on this because this is a very coarse ground. That's why we've got these bumps in here. It's a coarse ground on the wow powder. Let me show you which one that is. That is the metallic gold rich, and this is ultra high, which is very thick, and you may or may not be able to zoom in to see, but you can see that it's a very thick sandy texture. It's not a powder. So on that one, let's go ahead, and I pulled out, this one might be easier to see. There you go. You can kind of see how big, it's like granules almost. Again, this one is another ultra high. This is called metallic copper. And so let's go ahead and do the copper. So what we're going to do is, let me get a baby wipe and get that paint off of my hands. And I can get one out. Okay, so again, the easy part about this is it just all comes off with a single wipe, and it's very quick, and no brushes to clean up, and which is really handy if you don't have a sink very close to your craft space. Okay, so what we're going to do for this is we're going to get out, I usually use a coffee filter. You can use a piece of paper folded in half in order to work on, but on this one I'm just going to use this. And I'm going to use my Versamark. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the right side up, and I'm going to go ahead and punch out these little holes. I'm going to punch those out. Get them out of there. And so the right side down, I'm just going to go ahead and push this into the Versamark with my finger. Now I have two different Versamarks, one that I use for stamping and one that I use just for chipboard. Because if you can see, do you see how gross this pad has become? Ooh, we're out of focus. And that's the chipboard that will rub off on there, and it'll just make it really yucky looking. And if you're doing some fine detail, which a lot of people do with their Versamark, you don't want all those little pieces of chipboard in there. So I suggest you get two different ones. So you can see on here it's fairly shiny, and you can see that it's completely covered. And so let's go ahead and take our embossing powder. And I'm just going to put it on there really heavy. Okay. Whoops. And then I'm just going to kind of move it around, kind of left to right and up and down, and make sure that we have good coverage. Now this thicker stuff it doesn't stick quite as well. It tends to fall off real easy and blow off too. So it's a little harder to work with, but it does give a very neat effect. A really thick effect. Okay, so here we have, it's covered. And anytime you've got like a little side that's not, then I just go ahead and dip it back in there. So I'm going to put that aside over here. And I'm going to get rid of my embossing powder, or rather put it back into the jar. All right. And I always want to make sure that I put my cap on because it just stinks to dump your embossing powder all over your craft mat. Okay, so here I'm using, this is just a scrap piece of wood, and it is covered, it is sprayed with spray adhesive, and then it's got a layer of tinfoil, heavy-duty tinfoil wrapped over it. And what that does is it protects my surface, but also the tinfoil bounces the heat back up, so it ends up heating the piece from both sides at the same time, so it tends to heat it more evenly and quicker. So I'm going to go ahead and use my heat gun. This is a Martha Stewart heat gun. I usually let it warm up for about 10 seconds. And on this one, I've got some holes right here that I can just hold it in place. And I think I'm almost knocking my phone off. Here we go. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. So I'm going to start further back so that it's not blowing off the powder. If it's blowing off your powder, you need to back up a little bit. And I will start on the one end. And you can probably start to see that changing. And as soon as it melts and starts turning shiny, you just move on. Now with the metallics and the glitters, now this one does have a couple bubbles in it, and I think I can go ahead and pop those. Reheat. Very good. I'm just going to go and get them off of there. Okay, so here we go. This is what our copper looks like. Oh, that's a little bright on you. Let's see. The foil is quite bright. Okay, here we go. Still a bit warm. So I'll bring up the gold here. So there is the gold and there is the copper. Just really, really lovely, easy to do. I do recommend using the Versamark because it's super sticky and it will hold your embossing powder really well. I have used the Ranger embossing. It's not as sticky and it doesn't stay as moist as long. So I don't really recommend that one as much. I don't really use mine anymore, even though I have refills for it and everything. So anywho, so there is the heat embossing. And we're going to take a little break since we've got our first half done, and we're going to come back with our second half where we're going to go over glitter, metallic rub, and the crystal 3D lacquer or glossy accents. So we will see you in just a minute.